Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody on this Saturday midday. It is June 6th, 2026. Yet another week has flown by in the tropics, and this is surprisingly, just looking back at it now, this is the first week of we have now been through the first week of hurricane season. Kind of hard to believe already, but we are 1 week in, June 6th, 2026. Welcome to everybody who is joining. We're going to wait a minute or so for people to start joining here. Hopefully we get a decent amount of people on. And I hope all of you are having a great day today. We're going to talk about what's going on in the tropics, especially with the Eastern Pacific, where we are tracking multiple disturbances right now. One of them, an Invest 91E, and one of them could potentially have implications on tropical weather in the Gulf and in the Atlantic. We're going to go over all of that, and we're also going to go over, in general, how things are looking like in the tropics for the rest of the week and over the next few weeks. It looks like we already have someone in here. Brandon Dunn, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Brandon. Haven't seen you in a long time. Hope you're doing well. And before I get started as well, want to introduce you to Danny, who is joining me this week. And he's going to help us give some thoughts, and we're going to take a look at the tropics. Good to have you, Danny.
For sure. I wasn't here last week, but I'm glad to be back. Hope it's a good time for everyone.
Yeah, glad to have you along as well. Let's start off, as we typically do every single video or stream that we do, taking a look at what is happening on the National Hurricane Center Bulletin. And in the Pacific, we have Tropical Storm Amanda, which is still continuing to churn out here, but it is probably not far from when it is going to dissipate. It is at 40 miles per hour, minimum central pressure of 1,006 millibars, and this is just going to continue on off to the west here. Let's see where it's moving right now. It's moving southwest now, so it's now moving in that southwesterly direction, and it's probably going to die off here in the next day or so and not be significant in any sort of way at all. But the interest of where we need to watch is closer to Mexico and Central America here. And I've been mentioning it and talking about it for the last several weeks, especially this region here. And in this time period, early June, we would really start to see an uptick of activity in the Pacific and also in the Atlantic as well. And we're going to go over what might happen in the Atlantic in just a little bit here. But I will warn you, the theme that you will see today is that there's a lot of uncertainty as to what might potentially happen, but at least on the Pacific side, we have two areas of interest. One of them is Invest 91E, so we have yet another disturbance here in the Pacific. The latest chances of that are at a high chance of both in the next 48 hours and 7 days for potential development, up to a 70-70 for both. And another moderate chance as well, up to a 60% chance of development here as well, closer to the Central American coastline. So what do you think about that? Two disturbances in the Pacific already getting active.
Yeah, setting the tone right into the season. Well, the Eastpac season started in mid-May, but right into, I guess the more traditional start of the season by most people in the start of June. It's like, I guess it's expected, right? We're in a strong El Nino apparently coming. So
apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently. All right. So here's a look at the satellite. And let me just really quickly refresh this. We're using Windy's satellite loop today because somebody suggested that I should use Windy a little bit more. So I guess that's what we're going to do. And you can see the general mass of showers and thunderstorms here that we are dealing with. And this is happening because of a Central American gyre Lots of energy over Central America here, helping to spin up quite a broad area of low pressure in the Eastern Pacific, and this is also associated as well along the ITCZ here in the Eastern Pacific. But in general, lots of broad showers and thunderstorms here. One of them is Invest 91E, and let's actually zoom in on that a little bit. And you can see it's a very broad system right now. And obviously with that, there is a lot of uncertainty with the models here. But Invest 91E, we're going to have to watch closely here. One of these two systems, in my opinion, at least one or two of them are probably going to develop. And regardless of what happens in the Gulf here, out of one of these two systems, we are definitely going to see impacts to land in Mexico and Central America. I think that is pretty much a given here, but I think it's really I think what is going to happen not only to Mexico, but also beyond and Central America as well, is definitely going to depend on how both of these systems behave here. If both of them are able to consolidate and kind of separate from the broad influence that both of these systems have, or the kind of general broad area of influence that these systems are a part of. And a good way to represent that here is looking at the vorticity map right now, and especially in the Pacific here, you can kind of see both of these areas are embedded within a broad area here along the ITCZ. But there are definitely two vort maxes here. One of them to the west, that's 91E, and you can take a look at how that looks. And I mean, there is definitely some visible cyclonic rotation here on satellite, but obviously it is definitely broad and has yet to consolidate more. And then the other feature here is the western feature, or the eastern feature, not yet an invest, and it's probably ways away from being an invest, but this is how it looks like here on satellite. Also looking somewhat decent, definitely has some showers and thunderstorms going with it, but obviously probably has a little bit more work to do. But this is going to be the feature that I think we'll especially have to watch and see as it moves northward, what implications it'll have, because it'll be moving over Central America. We're definitely going to see a lot of rain to Central America and Mexico. That's probably going to be the biggest impact brought by both of these storms here. And we'll talk about the rainfall in a little bit, but especially this eastern feature here, it's probably going to be lifted northward over Central America, and that's when we're really going to see especially this Central American gyre pattern come together. But then it's going to be a question of whether that is able to lift northward as well from Central America and into the Gulf, and potentially try to develop, especially if conditions in the Gulf will allow to do so. And I think that's where we kind of have been in terms of watching how the tropics are going to unfold here over the last several days. And I think that's probably what the general kind of consensus of what to watch for is probably going to continue to be as well over the next several days here. So what are your thoughts, Danny? How are you seeing things right now in terms of what is currently happening?
Definitely an interesting timeline ahead. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, we have our two systems that might come out in the Eastern Pacific. Um, that maybe one of them, one of the, like, I don't know, we have the Central American gyre that might potentially happen, which is notorious for this time of year. It
Mm-hmm.
could potentially enhance the chances for something in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, and like, that the same story of like as we usually see this time of year in the Gulf. So like I definitely would watch it. You know what I'm saying? There's definitely something that might have a chance. You know what I'm saying? In that area that we definitely have to watch.
Definitely,
Definitely.
definitely. But what we should definitely talk about too is the potential impacts to Central America here, and especially to Mexico with 91E. And let's talk about 91E a little bit more here. Here's the latest track guidance for it. and this system here is going to probably go into Mexico. It's embedded within the ITCZ here, but it's probably going to break off and eventually move on to the north, move to the north, and then to the northwest here, kind of curve like this. And initially, especially earlier in the week, my general thought was that this was probably going to break off and maybe stay away from the Mexican coastline. And if this did stay away from the Mexican coastline, I thought that we probably would actually see a decent system out of the Eastern Pacific here. But more than likely, both of the systems here, in terms of whatever happens, we're probably going to see both of these systems be very broad, very short-lived, and very weak, because more than likely they will both dive into Central America and Mexico very quickly. But I mean, it is still significant because we will be seeing impacts here to land from potential tropical activity, and even if it's weak, there obviously will still be impacts that are brought here. But just to really quickly show you the intensity guidance, both systems are expected to be weak. Invest 91E right now. Barely any of the models actually really show it truly developing here. So there's honestly still a chance that we won't see development at all from either of these systems. Although I do think at least one of them will form. But more than likely here, as you can especially see by the intensity guidance, they probably will be very weak. What do you think about what's going to happen here intensity-wise?
I mean, it probably won't be anything that severe, like nothing that strong. But obviously, with that being said, I really do worry for Mexico as always when it comes to these situations because they're very prone to flooding. You know what I'm saying? Street flooding is very prevalent in this
Mm-hmm.
area. And, with these systems, like, I don't know, in a way, it's like people underestimate them because they're not like powerhouse hurricanes, but like we've
Right.
seen numerous times of like systems that may not even have a name that had like chances to develop, but
Yeah.
didn't. Or yeah, sometimes they are named too. Like 45 to 50 mile per hour systems that may not be much wind threats, but they bring so much rainfall that really, you know, threatens life because of it. You know what I'm saying? That's the one thing that concerns me about, especially 91E. You know, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely going to be a big impact here. Probably one of the biggest impact to write home about for Mexico and Central America is the amount of rain that'll more than likely happen, and that's kind of one of the biggest impacts of the Central American gyre as a whole. Regardless, is the amount of rain and moisture that we typically see over Central America and Mexico. But obviously, these Central American gyre patterns pique our interest because sometimes they can lift northward or they can help contribute to energy that goes on to develop in the Eastern Pacific or the Gulf as well. But the number one impact here is always rain, and I'm going to show you the rainfall totals expected, especially over Central America, in just a little bit here. But to kind of give you an idea of what's going to happen here, what we're looking at now, let's take a look at the models here, at least the operational models, and I'll also show you the ensembles as well. But starting off with the 6E GFS here, what happens? Well, you can see we definitely have our two systems here that begin to consolidate over time, and especially with 91E here, you can see begins to develop and consolidates into a small low pressure here off the Mexican coastline. But just like that, in about the next 2 or 3 days, it'll more than likely move inland and already be inland by early next week and won't be much of a tropical, nothing significant. Will definitely not have enough time for anything significant to brew here. But interestingly enough, the GFS is much more aggressive here on the eastern feature, and it consolidates that here over the next several days and kind of brings it on to the west here and takes that from being near Central America to then crashing it into Mexico over the next several days, especially as we get towards the end of next week. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because you're going to have to keep that in mind, especially when we look at the other models and see what they show with this eastern feature here, especially when it comes to talking about what might potentially happen in the Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico or whatever you want to call it. But that's the GFS solution. But then, interestingly enough, the GFS has also had some random spin up here in the northeastern Gulf happen as well. But that doesn't really seem to be because of the gyre, so I'm not really paying attention to that. The GFS always does very interesting things, especially when it comes to spinning up vorticity here. So I'm not really paying attention to that as much. But definitely keeping an eye out on things here with the Eastern Pacific. But let's take a look at the European. And I'll start with the 6Z run from today first, but then we're going to go back to the 0Z run. But let's run through the European here and see what it shows. Also shows both systems consolidating here slightly, although doing so very briefly before they move on shore. The eastern feature here moves onshore into Mexico. The western feature moves onshore into Mexico here very quickly by early next week. And then the other eastern feature here consolidates as well, but also very briefly. Definitely not like the GFS, where the GFS has this consolidating and then actually becoming pretty strong enough that it kind of moves on off to the west here. It moves very quickly into Central America. And then, as this moves into Central America, that's when you could really start to see the overall gyre pattern here really begin to kick up over Mexico, especially over the Yucatan here. You see a very broad area where you kind of see these isobars here in a counterclockwise fashion, but it's a very, very broad, lower pressure area of cyclonic turning. That is the signature here of the Central American gyre. But then beyond that, as we go into the 7-day time frame, you then see here on the European, because of that, it lifts northward into the Gulf and tries to develop, although on the 0Z European frame here, it actually doesn't really develop. And that is where the uncertainty comes in here, because that's the 0Z European. But let's compare it to what the 12Z European showed yesterday. And interestingly enough, the 12Z European yesterday also kind of brought this up in a similar fashion here, where it lifts northward into Central America, but actually showed, I'm going to have to refresh this because this is acting up on me, but also showed more development here in the Gulf. And then let's take a look at the European AI model. Also showing the same thing here, although the European AI does something a little bit different and tries to develop this, but brings this much more west and only consolidates this in the Bay of Campeche before it then moves into central northern Mexico here by the end of next week. So you can already see that there is a difference beginning to emerge here in what the models are showing, and a difference as well on really a run-to-run basis. It's not just a difference between the multiple models, but it's also a difference here between the different runs. And I want to show you especially by taking a look at the upper level pattern here. And I'm bringing up the upper level pattern because it's going to have a lot to do with how we're going to be able to see development here in the Gulf. And with that, there's also a very interesting Levi Cowan tweet that I want to show you towards the end here, which I think will probably explain this much better than me. But you can take a look at the 0Z Euro, and you can see where our low pressure is that generally lifts northward from Central America, and then it kind of lifts northward into the Gulf here. And the wind shear in general is definitely lower in the Gulf, at least when it tries to lift northward here, but it actually kind of becomes stronger, and I don't know. That definitely doesn't look as much like a favorable pattern that you would watch um, if you're looking for development here. And I say that because let's go back. I'll stop this at hour 210. Let's go back to yesterday's run. Probably had a little bit more of a more unfavorable pattern here, to be honest with you. Kind of have a bunch of northerly shear coming directly at this system here. And I mean, it makes sense because the 12Z did show some development, but definitely not as significant as, especially, let's actually go back all the way to the 0Z run from yesterday. And that's when they had, you see here, the 0Z run from yesterday is definitely different from the 0Z run today, where they actually show something here trying to consolidate in the Gulf, and then it lifts northward and eventually makes landfall along the northern Gulf Coast. And going all the way back to the 0Z run from yesterday, you can see that there's an even bigger difference with the upper level pattern. Definitely a lot less shear over the Gulf, and also a little bit of this kind of poleward outflow channel that also sets up as well over the low pressure. So there's more of a mechanism for development and convergence in the atmosphere that leads to some sort of development here versus before, going to today's model run, not so much. Definitely looks like there's much more in the way of I'm going backwards. Let me see. Let's go forward. More today, there's definitely much more in the way of stronger shear here in the Gulf. But what I'm trying to especially show you is look at the difference here. Going back to this. So this is the. Let me back up here a little bit. This is the 0Z run upper level pattern today on the Euro. This was it in the 12Z. This was the 0Z run from yesterday, the 0Z run from the day before, or the 12Z run from the day before, and the 0Z run from the day before that. And let me just really quickly go through the models here. Already quite a bit of a difference in just the past few model runs. So things are fluctuating right now and changing and really ebbing and flowing here on a run-to-run basis. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think the uncertainty is especially more jarring when we get to hour 240 here. And notice, especially over the last few model runs, just how much changes here on the Euro, especially from yesterday to today, because yesterday we had a much more favorable upper level pattern here, much less in the way of wind shear, no strong northerly shear that was present on the model, but then 12Z it appeared, and then today you also kind of see that pattern as well. So lots of differences here in not just the difference in models here, but difference on a run-to-run basis. But let's actually take a look at the European AI model as well, and even that, just comparing how the 0Z European looked like here. Let's go back to the 0Z European look, how it looked like. Even just taking a look at the 0Z European here to how the European AI looks, there's definitely a difference in the European AI, especially in the Western Gulf here. Definitely looks a lot less favorable, especially with a lot of this northerly shear here. So what I'm trying to point out is the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty in the models, and things are changing on a run-to-run basis. And I've been talking for a lot, so let's get your opinion on what you think here, Danny, with these run-to-run changes here.
With this system in the Gulf that the models are showing, like, I guess it's not shocking for the time of year, especially given the situation that it's a Central American gyre type situation. So the
Mm-hmm.
models have really different viewpoints, and it changes so much in a run to run basis that one run they show one thing, and when next run they show something totally different.
Right,
Um,
right.
and it's like it's annoying in a way as a tracker, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like you don't really know until it's actually happening. It's one of those type of situations that once the until the gyre is physically present, you don't really know exactly what will happen with this, like what model is going to be right, like what's the, what's actually going to be the favorability pattern, you know what I'm saying? It's like
Mm-hmm.
you just don't know, you know you just don't know,
Right.
like, it also affects, you know what I'm saying? Like it also depends with the system if it goes, I don't know, more in the Bay of Campeche, or does it go in the Western Gulf,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Definitely. There's a lot of uncertainty in these CAG setups. They do tend to be all over the place, especially with the pattern that tends to shape up. So lots to watch here over the next upcoming week. But one thing that I think, and we talked about this before, and I guess we should have brought it up before. One thing that'll definitely be the case is a lot of rainfall here over Central America and over Mexico. And this is the GFS forecast for the total rainfall out to the next 2 weeks. And yeah, quite a bit of rainfall for many, especially on the Pacific side of the coastline here for Mexico and Central America. The GFS is indicating for some potentially up to 2 feet of rain. So quite a moist pattern here coming over the next week, Danny.
When you said 2 feet of rain, right?
Yeah, 2 feet of rain, up to 24 inches. And obviously,
Yeah, that's really high.
that's definitely really high. And obviously, for those I'd imagine in Mexico and Central America, if you're watching from there, you probably would, like that in millimeters, I believe. um, but 2 feet of rain is definitely very high. And the rainfall tends to be very much underestimated when it comes to, these tropical systems. When it comes to tracking, people tend to focus on the category and the wind speed and the pressure. But the biggest impact that people don't talk about is the rainfall, and there's going to be a lot of it over Mexico and the Central American countries over the next week, and definitely over the next few days as we get whatever to spin up here in the Eastern Pacific to come on land. That alone is going to definitely bring quite a bit of rainfall here over the next few days alone, and especially for Mexico and Central America. You mentioned this. You mentioned this before, Danny, with the mudslides and the street flooding that's very common, but want to mention it again. That'll definitely be a huge issue here. So don't want to diminish that. And I definitely want to, write that point home here as we track what initially happens here in the Pacific. But obviously, there's still a lot of uncertainty here with what happens in the ensembles or in the models. But let's actually take a look at the ensembles. Starting off with the GEFS ensembles here, you can see we have both systems in the Pacific, and then we see that the eastern part here lift northward, and the GEFS ensembles are definitely showing some activity in the Gulf. Not all of it is strong. Most of it is actually pretty weak, but there's definitely some activity here that the GEFS ensembles show. The European ensembles, also the same case, kind of similar to the GEFS, although honestly the European actually is, interestingly enough, more aggressive. And I will say, I think the European is probably more aggressive on the ensembles on the 0Z than they were for the 12Z from yesterday. Yet the European operational downtrended. I don't know what the case. I don't know what's happening there, but uh, sometimes things are definitely unexplainable. But the European and the GEFS definitely showing a decent amount of activity here on the ensembles. But we go to the AI models, and the AI models show absolutely nothing happening in the Gulf at all. The Google AI shows absolutely nothing here, not even one or two ensembles. And in fact, they're honestly not even that aggressive with activity here in the Eastern Pacific. And interestingly enough, the AI model actually is more in line with the GFS here in showing that the Eastern feature develops pretty strongly and actually moves to the west here and impacts Mexico instead of just going straight northward and end up getting picked up into Central America and then eventually into the Gulf. Whereas the European ensembles also do show development. It's not like the Google AI where they don't show anything. The European AI ensembles do show something, but definitely not as strong as the global models here. So there's an interesting divide, not just happening between the recent models themselves, but especially when you look at the models on a regular operational here, the GEFS and the EPS ensembles versus the AI ensembles here, the Google AI and the European AI ensembles. You're interesting that we're kind of getting this dynamic here, Danny, where we're starting to see a divide between operational versus AI.
It actually adds like a very interesting, like thought. Like back before the AI happened, all we had was like regular models, and that's all we came with. But like since the AI models, have come along and actually have performed pretty solidly, all things considered, it
Mm-hmm.
definitely makes you wonder if like they're into something. You know what I'm saying? You at least have to give the thought, like, and it kind of makes things interesting in a way too, because it's like, uh, like I don't know, like in specific these situations that the operational models that you see on tropical tidbits
Mm-hmm.
comparison to like the AI models, it's like they show something like completely different. It's like in a way it does kind of like get you confused because it's like they're showing things completely different, so it's like you don't really know what to like, I don't know, think of some specific systems, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
should I lean AI or should I lean like the OG models,
Right. The OG
which
models.
I wish, like, honestly, in these situations there just was more agreement, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I guess we do have to take the AI models serious for what they do show, given the track
Yeah.
record so far.
Yeah, this definitely will be a test, in my opinion, for whether or not AI is the way to go, whether or not AI is actually going to lead the revolution model consensus wise. But I do really quickly want to point this out, though. Um, Initially in the Pacific, the GEFS and the European ensembles are definitely more aggressive with showing development here in the Pacific, and I'd imagine so. At least going back to the operational models, it definitely seems like well, actually, maybe not so much on the Zero Z European, but the Zero Z European definitely showed a decent amount of development here of 91E as it went into Mexico. But if we take a look at the ensembles here for both the Google AI and the AIFS ensembles, they do show some stuff here happening with 91E going into Mexico, but it's not as significant. It's not really as strong. So I guess that could be one thing that explains the difference between the two models is that they show not as strong of a signal that develops initially in the Pacific, which I guess in turn leads to not as strong and as great of a moisture or a strong Central American gyre pattern that sets up that is then able to lift northward into the Gulf. Maybe that's something to take into consideration.
Right.
But then I think to kind of top it all off here, we have Levi Cowan, the King Levi Cowan himself, put out a tweet about this yesterday, and I think whenever Levi Cowan puts out a tweet, I think that kind of just smooths everything out, and I feel like everybody just kind of listens to him, and I really do think that he brings a very good perspective and a solid perspective, and really breaks things down well. So I'm actually going to read this tweet here from Levi Cowan that he put out yesterday. Some possibility of tropical activity in the Gulf exists beginning late next week. The Central American monsoon is becoming active as the multiple equatorial waves, the MJO, the Kelvin, and the Rossby, overlap next week near 90 west longitude. So pretty much saying that the atmosphere is going to be favorable. And we mentioned that over the last several weeks here, we would see the MJO move through the Pacific right about now. And that's exactly what's happening. The eastern lobe of the monsoon trough, perhaps even taking the form of a weak gyre, is expected to attempt to migrate northwestward into the western Caribbean or southern Gulf, and a scenario which often creates a potential for messy cyclones to develop and ultimately approach the Gulf Coast. However, much will depend on support from large-scale flow to the north, and that's what I was mentioning with the upper level pattern before. An amplified upper level trough digs over the Gulf, dredging deep tropical moisture northward and assisting the migration of the monsoon lobe into a position that facilitates cyclone formation over the Gulf by next weekend or early the following week. Other models, notably most AI-based models, and we were just talking about that divide before here, show a much less amplified upper-level pattern with northwesterlies dominating the Gulf and Western Caribbean. This would suppress northward moisture transport and the migration and strength of the monsoonal vorticity pocket. The result is much less cyclone activity in the Gulf on these model runs. We probably need a couple more days to identify which scenario the forecast is trending towards. For now, a lowish probability of tropical activity in the Gulf region in 7 to 10 days is in view, but no concrete threat exists yet. And I think that is pretty much the best way to sum up what the situation is with whatever is going to happen in the Gulf right now. Lots of uncertainty, and definitely something we will be watching here over the next week. So what do you think about it, Danny? Any thoughts you have to add on to Levi Cowan here? Although I think Levi Cowan pretty much sums this up as best as one possibly could.
Basically, I guess a way I could break it down a little simpler for people watching is that if there's a like, I don't know, a stronger trough, then it's more likely that the moisture from the gyre will pull up and maybe increase such chances for development. But if it's weaker, then it's more likely to stay more south, and chances for development are not as high because it's not going to have as much open water to work with. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, and let's actually represent it here, taking a look at the European from today to yesterday, comparing today's European run to yesterday, and you can see what happens. We definitely see that there is moisture here that builds over Central America, especially as we get the gyre to get going. But then as we get towards late next week, as the low pressure here lifts northward from Central America into the Gulf, you could see, at least on today's run of the European, a lot of the moisture here kind of gets suppressed southward. And you could also see that, there's a low pressure that tries developing here initially near the Yucatan. And I don't know, by the way, Danny, if you're watching the feed, so you could, and if you're following along. So I don't know if you're seeing it, but you can see that there's a low pressure here that tries to consolidate near the Yucatan, but then the moisture associated with the gyre here kind of gets left behind, gets suppressed from the north, as Levi Cowan says, and then kind of drifts into this dry air here. And so obviously because of that, we don't really see much development that happens. Versus the 0Z run from yesterday, you could see a lot more moisture here makes it northward into the Gulf, and then eventually that leads to a low pressure here that develops and probably is still, sheared somewhat and, struggling from dry air. I mean, that's typical this time of year with, these early June Gulf tropical systems. Very typical that we get lopsided and shear and whatnot, but 1,002 millibar low and a few closed isobars here, that's probably a weak tropical system that then lifts northward into Louisiana here. So definitely the dynamic that you could see play out here that Levi Cowan laid out, and definitely an interesting one for sure. So we're going to have a lot to watch here over the next week, and the biggest thing I could say right now is that the tropics remain very uncertain. I think that's probably the best thing we could say for right now. What do you think about that? Pretty sure you could agree, right? I mean, there's
Oh
so much
yeah,
uncertainty.
1000%.
We're probably just gonna have to watch here. And
Like
we're gonna,
especially with the gyre, like
yeah,
it's gonna take a long time to like I don't know until that system and the gyre is physically present with us,
mm-hmm,
we cannot really say much about it. We just have to wait and see, honestly. As much
yeah,
as it hates me to say, but like we have to wait and see because these systems are complicated. You know, we
yeah,
just simply don't know. We're not that advanced yet to know 100% certainty in these type of situations yet. You know,
definitely.
it's one of the most complex um ways the cyclone could form is in this situation. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know, like the way the models react to it is definitely, it's definitely something that in 2026 that we've improved on, but it's
Right.
still not amazing. Something
Yeah.
definitely that still needs work on.
Yeah, and I
That's for
also
sure.
brought up the precipitation here from the AIFS, and well, first of all, lots of precipitation over Mexico and Central America. That's pretty much guaranteed. So that'll be something that we're going to deal with for them here over the next 2 weeks. But you could see a lot of the moisture here, you know, kind of gets suppressed into the Bay of Campeche and into Mexico here. And we don't see a lot of that moisture lift northward on the European AI. I mean, they do still show development, at least on the 0Z run. There's still development that occurs. The 6Z run here, the AIFS, there's still development that occurs here in the Bay of Campeche, but it's not like we could probably go all the way back to let's go back to the 6Z run of the AIFS yesterday. You could definitely see here I mean they show less develop they showed less development then than they show now, interestingly enough, but moisture wise, uh, definitely more of the moisture was able to lift northward and make its way into the northern Gulf. So this is not only going to have an implication, in my opinion, on whether or not we're going to be able to see development here in the Gulf, but also probably will have an implication as well on just the general weather pattern, rainfall wise for the Gulf Coast over the next week too. Uh, so multiple factors at play here and multiple things will be impacted. So definitely a lot of things to watch here for sure over the next week. All right, moving on from that, really quickly before we end off here, and I also want to get your thoughts about this, Danny, but ENSO. Let's talk about ENSO for a little bit. And I did make a video yesterday on El Nino, but I thought, why not talk about it today? Here to take a look at the latest sea surface temperature anomalies in both the Pacific and the Atlantic. The Atlantic side, I mean, things are generally warm, although they are a little bit cooler in the eastern Atlantic. The Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, though, or the Gulf of America, if that's what you want to call it, the Gulf of America, the Gulf, is generally warmer. Sea surface temperature anomalies throughout most of the Gulf here are at least, a quarter to half a degree Celsius, and especially here in the Bay of Campeche, interestingly enough, especially if, we generally see most development here in the Bay of Campeche, we actually see sea surface temperature anomalies as much as at least a degree Celsius above normal. So, I mean, sea surface temperatures are definitely not going to be an issue for, whatever tries to develop here in the Gulf. But on the other hand, very, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies remain here in the Pacific, along the tropical Pacific. And interestingly enough, this patch here off the Mexican coastline, especially closer to the Baja, sea surface temperature anomalies that remain upwards of 3 degrees Celsius above normal. Quite incredible.
No, for real. For real.
And then, of course, we have the building warmth here along the equatorial Pacific, obviously, because of El Nino. Quite the warm anomalies also showing up here off of South America, but also, interestingly enough, more consistent anomalies of at least 2 degrees Celsius beginning to show up here along the equatorial Pacific. And 2 degrees Celsius is obviously, super Nino threshold, which is obviously what we are all anticipating this year. So interesting. We're already starting to see that play out. But taking a look at the Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomaly average, 1.4 degrees Celsius. So not quite at Super Nino yet, right?
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet, but we're definitely getting there. And an interesting tweet that I found, somebody mentioning here, credit to Weathermaster1, and he says that this is the strongest El Nino has ever been on this date in history. And then he, adds a little bit of, ominous foreshadowing here. People do not know what's coming once the Nino region averages start to drop, but soon the temperatures don't. So quite the ominous wording there. But what he's talking about is the fact that the daily sea surface temperature, not the average, not the departure from the average, although you could actually see it here, the departure from average. The daily temperature is at 29.15 degrees Celsius, at least this was as of June 4th, versus the average for this time of year. The climatological average is 27.74 degrees Celsius, and the anomaly obviously is 1.4 degrees Celsius above normal. So actually, you can kind of see how the actual sea surface temperature versus the averages, and that's how we get the anomaly here. It's the anomaly is just a difference of the actual sea surface temperature versus the current average, and we subtract the two, and that's the anomaly value that we get. But this year, so far, as you can see by this graph here, we are already well above what all of the other years have been. And I mean, that just goes to show how strong of an El Nino that is building in the Pacific right now. And obviously, you can see that here with the European forecast that came out for June. And this definitely got a lot of attention on social media and Twitter. And I talked about it yesterday. But, record temperatures right now. Well, the European expects record temperatures, record sea surface temperatures to continue here in the Pacific over the next few months. The latest Nino 3.4 forecast as of June, the European is expecting this El Nino to go all the way up to potentially 3 degrees Celsius. I mean, some of the ensembles of the European show it slightly below it, but most of the ensembles go above it. I'd say at least 60% of the ensembles here for the relative forecast. The actual raw sea surface temperature anomalies are even crazier. So, quite a wild thing that's happening here on the European. But interestingly enough, we really quickly want to compare it to last month. This was the May forecast, and look at how much we've actually jumped up in the June forecast compared to last month. The May forecast, a lot of the ensembles here for the relative Nino were definitely above Super Nino threshold, but for the June forecast, all of the ensembles are above Nino threshold, and most of them are above the 3 degrees Celsius threshold, which obviously, if we reach 3 Celsius, that would be record-breaking. So, El Nino is definitely ramping up here in the Pacific. I think there's no denying that at this point. What do you think about that, Danny?
Honestly, with what the Euro showed the other day, with most all the ensembles are showing 3+ El Nino,
yeah, with the raw sea surface temperatures.
Yeah, I honestly was amazed by that. Though I would have to see it to believe it. You know what I'm saying? Because that's never happened,
Yeah.
But I guess the chances are really there that this might be the strongest we've ever seen. But at least since that's the case, I have to see it to believe it though, because this would not just break the record, but it will be somehow shatter 1997. You know what I'm saying? It would shatter it. If it is right.
Yeah, and it's especially jarring, too, in my opinion, that the relative forecast is also very strong on 3 Celsius, too, because the relative Nino forecast is, the forecast that you have to subtract by a few points to kind of factor out for any potential, background warming that we're seeing from, as the climate changes and stuff like that. But on the relative forecast too, they're also quite aggressive. So, I mean, I'm on your boat, Danny. I'm definitely going to have to see this to believe this because this is a quite aggressive forecast coming out of the European here. But regardless, strong El Nino is definitely on the way. Is it?
Yeah, for sure.
And I really don't know what that notification is. So strong El Nino is definitely on the way. And I did go more in depth into that in yesterday's video, which I did mainly as an update on El Nino. So if you want to look at that, definitely go ahead and do so. But to just kind of give you a summary, strong El Nino is on the way, and it's definitely already beginning to ramp up pretty significantly right now. All right, so since we've kind of mostly gone over everything, I guess now will be the opportunity to answer any questions or comments that you might have. And Brandon Dunn actually did say, what about the 1877 to 1878 El Nino, which is highly known as the worst event in modern history? I think we should know what the relative indices were then, which tells us the story to if this year is record. Well, Brandon, when it comes to the relative for Nino index, I think that mainly matters more today because the relative Nino index is mainly supposed to be kind of a factor to subtract any global warming that is happening today that might be impacting the raw Nino index and skewing it. So I'm not really sure if the actual relative index matters going back to 1877. Rather than it more mattering in today's context. But either way, and this is something that's definitely being thrown around a lot is the 1877 event, and that was a record-breaking event. And interestingly enough, and I feel like a lot of people are using this, to be quite honest with you, and I'm pretty sure you would agree with me, Danny. A lot of people are using this as a hype, talking point. But the 1877 El Nino did wipe out, I think, like 4% of the global population because of the droughts and the famines that happened with it. And we are definitely going to see some extreme weather patterns this year, given that, we are talking about a extreme event here with El Nino, but not sure that's
Right.
what's going to happen. But what about you and your 2 cents on that, Danny?
I would definitely watch out because definitely maybe like in countries in Asia for sure, like for those type of things to happen. But at the same time, I don't know if it will get that extreme as it did in 1877 because in
Mm-hmm.
1877, like technology was nowhere near close as it is now. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I would, yeah. No, I'll still take it serious for sure. You know what I'm saying? Because the droughts, they're not going to change. You know what I'm saying? It's still going to exist. But I would think that things will be better than they were then because of the resources we have now.
Yeah,
Definitely
for sure.
well improved. You know.
Most likely, for sure. Somebody else asks, what system do you think will be the strongest for 2026? And this is by Alien T Will '07. He says he thinks Gonzalo will be the strongest. So, what do you think will be the strongest?
I've been thinking Hannah, but honestly, it's between that Gonzalo to Isaias range, 1,000%, one
Right,
thousand percent.
right. And
Yeah,
obviously, it kind of depends on, if we get that far down. I think we will get that far down. What? Gonzalo, Hannah, Isaias, what is that? The seventh to ninth storm
seven.
range?
Yeah, I think yeah.
So, I'd say we'll get that far down, right? What are you seeing for the hurricane season numbers wise? Because if you guys have been following me, I put out my personal forecast, and I think we'll get down to 12. So that's roughly going to be like the L storm, I believe, right?
Right. Yeah. I think we'll get to Nana. I don't know. We get a lot of hurricanes. Like I don't know. We get. I'm not sure of over 5 hurricanes. Those 6 could happen. Like the forecast I had. was 14.52 with an ace in 90. So
Mm-hmm.
east like that Hannah range is literally in the middle of
Yeah.
that. It's literally in the middle.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I
I'd
think
say
we could still sneak a lot of systems somehow, even if we have a strong union. I think we could still have some spin ups happen, even if they're not that strong systems. You know?
right. So yeah, I would say probably along the lines of somewhere around Gonzalo or Hannah or Isaias would be the strong storm of the year, since I think that would probably make the most sense. But to be honest with you, you can't really guess that kind of stuff. Things
Right.
sometimes happen on a very, very random
Weird.
basis. Yeah,
Yeah.
it honestly could be that we get the strongest storm in August this year, and that storm ends up being the D or the E name storm, which I believe is the D storm is Dolly, and the E storm is Edward. So it might be that storm. It might be that instead of Gonzalo or Hannah or whatever. So at the end of the day, it's just a wait and see game when
Right.
all is said and done. Uh, for me, 11 name systems, 5 hurricanes, 2 majors, and 98. Yeah, I could see that. 11, 5,
Very
2.
similar to mine.
Very similar to mine as well, especially the hurricanes and majors. I believe I'm going with 12, 5, 2. So not far. Not far off. We're not far off from each other. I definitely agree with that forecast. And ace as well, 90 ace. Um, what do you think about the ace, Danny? How do you think we're going to see? What do you think we're going to see in terms of ace this year? Because I definitely see some people online, especially saying that we're going to see like something like 30 or 40 ace this year, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm questioning that.
I really, honestly, if you want me to be honest, I respect those people's opinions, but I don't think that's possible in today's day and age. I really don't. If it was like
Right.
68 that they predicted, I'll be like, that's fair. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, maybe I might be wrong, but like I'm more like in that 90 ace range. I really think that there at least will be one system that will be really long track that will
Mm-hmm.
really up in the ace count. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I really do think so. And I feel like this year, honestly, does look more favorable than a year like 2015 did as well. You know what I'm saying? So, like, and even 2015 still managed to have a long tracker despite all the people saying that, oh, I remember that year people were saying like 6 systems would happen, you know?
And I think people
And
are
then
saying
it
that for
happened.
this year too.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. Some of these forecasts that are going as low as they are for the Atlantic, I can't see it. I mean, we are going to have a very strong El Nino this year, but let's actually go back to the sea surface temperature anomaly map really briefly here. This sea surface temperature anomaly pattern doesn't really look that bad, if I'll be honest with you. Sure, we have some cooler anomalies here in the eastern Atlantic. We're starting to see some warmer anomalies here build in the deep tropics. I mean, early on in the season, we tend to see a lot of Saharan air and stronger trade winds, which tend to kind of cool down periodically the sea surface temperature anomalies here, especially in years where the Atlantic isn't near record breaking warmth. There really tends to be a lot of back and forth in terms of the pattern that we have in the Atlantic here, but also in the Gulf and in the Caribbean here, and just in general off the southeast coast. Um, the the sea surface temperature anomalies are definitely warmer, especially in the Gulf, and um, I don't know, we've seen over the last several years we've had quite a bit of homegrown activity, and especially off the southeast coast. I think actually, off the southeast coast, that's where we mainly saw most of our activity last year.
Right.
Right? So, uh, and I mean, in general as well, this region here, the southwestern Atlantic, given the El Nino pattern, that tends to be the most favored area for activity this year. So, there are definitely still some warmer anomalies out there, and something is going to come along and try. And I think more than enough things will happen to where we don't end up with 5 or 6 name storms in the Atlantic this year. It just doesn't really seem like that kind of pattern to me right now. It's going to be below normal, definitely, but or probably maybe if things are a little bit more active than expected, maybe we end up getting a little bit closer to normal. But I don't see us having 5 or 6 name storms, or even below 10 for that matter. And someone says here, the water is too warm in the Atlantic and except some areas for it to fall below 8. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a logical, I don't know, common sense. Like, I'm looking at it in the way of common sense, you know? I'm looking at it in that way, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Brandon Dunn says a shutdown season with very few name storms in the Atlantic is definitely possible this year. But this year, while the Pacific goes gangbusters, given the setup, but we'll see. I don't really think we have a true shutdown setup thing. That's the thing. I don't really think that the pattern is truly a shutdown type of season. It's going to be below normal, and the main driver for the fact that the season is going to be below normal is because, we have a super El Nino building, and that's obviously in and of itself going to bring, significantly suppressive factors, but I still think we will have, potentially periods in which we will see more than likely, 1 or 2 windows where some things will happen. So that's just my 2 cents on how things are looking like so far. I don't know how. I'm pretty sure you feel the same, right, Danny?
Oh, 100%. For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but of course, at the end of the day, uh, we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, it's
We'll
just
see
too
what
early.
happens.
Yeah.
It's too
Too
early.
early still.
1983 was a shutdown year with only 4 name storms. 1983 was a different time period, though. The Atlantic, especially the Atlantic itself, we were in a negative AMO. Um, it was just different back then, and I also say as well, not to kind of sound like that kind of person where we really don't we definitely get way more active seasons, but back then too, there were more than likely a number of missed storms storms that today would probably, get names, or in some cases barely get named, if you know what I mean, especially if you're a very, you know, uh, dedicated tracker to the Atlantic. Um,
Right.
but there were systems that were more than likely missed back then. Even in the 1980s, there were probably 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 named storms per year that were more than likely missed that would have gotten tagged today. So, um, I definitely think that the numbers are probably more than likely skewed to lower than what they actually were back then. So I don't really, I can't really see us getting a super duper inactive season overall right now. Uh, Probably for most of the season, we will be not so active, especially the late season when this super El Nino, by the time we get to mid to late September,
Right.
when we get this super El Nino going. And you know what? Since we're talking about it, let's actually go to the climate models really quickly right now. Um, I mean, this El Nino is ramping up pretty quickly. Let's actually go to the CFS here. Um, Give me a second. We're still building with the El Nino strength here as we get into August and September. In September, we are very strong, but I don't know. I don't know. We're still building, especially as we get into October and November. The El Nino is still, building here in the Pacific. So, I mean, the atmosphere kind of does lag by at least a month. So, uh, while a big chunk of the season is more than likely going to be suppressed, and it's definitely going to get even more suppressed as we get into, the late season here, I'd still say we will probably see at least a window in August or early September around the time of the peak where things will probably, jump up in activity for a brief period of time. And I'll leave the
Right.
floor open for you to offer your 2 cents.
Um, I don't know. It's like I feel like given the era we're in, I really do feel like at least August and September we'll find a way to shine to some degree. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Right.
it's kind of like it's the kind of the way it's been. You know what I'm saying? In the last, let's say, 15 to 20 years, it's been
Mm-hmm.
like that. You know what I'm saying? Specifically after 2010, I kind of feel like we're more in that like time for that. I don't know if like it's really possible to get under like 10 storms in the Atlantic anymore. I really don't think so. You know,
Right.
I think it's really hard for that to happen.
Right. And I'll show you with the velocity potential, setup here as well. As we get into July and August and September here, I mean, July, more than likely, not going to be very favorable. Obviously, most of the rising motion is strongly set up here in the Pacific. Lots of sinking air in the Eastern Atlantic and over Africa and in the Indian Ocean. And usually, for a hyperactive season, um, you know, you want to see the opposite. You want to see lots of rising air in the Indian Ocean and over Africa and sinking air in the Pacific here. But as we get into August and September, um, some of this rising air here does kind of shift eastward. And I mean, the sinking cell, especially here in the Indian Ocean, barely touches Africa, and the general setup of the rising and sinking air here is still unfavorable because more than likely, given the setup, we're going to definitely be in prevailing, low level easterly winds here in the tropics and probably upper level strong westerlies as well, given that, the most of the rising air will be in the Pacific and the outflow from the rising air will definitely be deposited onto the Atlantic, causing strong wind shear. You guys get the point on that. But uh, we don't see so much of these oranges here concentrated in terms of sinking air, concentrated in the Atlantic. So um, this doesn't really scream to me a super shutdown uh, season. Uh, to be quite honest, that's that again. That's
Right.
just that's just my opinion.
Right.
That's just my opinion. Let's see. It's especially been that way the last 10 years. However, with this year being way different than the last decade is another reason I suspect that less than 10 named storms to a near shutdown is possible. I don't see it right now. I don't see it right now. But of course, we'll see. Anything could happen. We're only at the very, very beginning of hurricane season, so lots is up in the air, and um, lots of things can still happen. All right, but with that being said, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Any final thoughts from you, Danny, before we close it off?
Just remember that we're still very early in the game. It's only June 6th. A lot could change, but
Mm-hmm.
keep tabs on what's happening for sure because you never know what could happen.
Definitely, we will definitely monitor and see how things change here over the next several weeks. And we will especially be monitoring the Gulf and whatever development happens here in the Pacific very closely over the next week to see, of course, what eventually will happen in the Gulf here. And we will be monitoring to see whether or not our first potential storm of the season is in the making in the Atlantic. All right, but I think that's going to wrap it up for today's discussion and today's live stream. It was really nice having you along, Danny, and um, also very nice having you all as well in the chat. I hope all of you enjoyed today's stream, and I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your day. And again, if you like today's stream, I would really appreciate if you like it. Subscribe to the channel if you saw my channel for the first time and you liked what you saw today and you want to see more. Definitely make sure to subscribe because we'll be doing these streams on a weekly basis and also doing videos as well on a daily basis as well. So if you're interested in all of that, please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll talk to you guys again soon.